Welcome to CTO Insights, where we unpack the strategies behind high-performing engineering teams. I'm your host, Katerina, and today I have the pleasure to welcome Georgina Shute, an engineering leader with over a decade of experience in the industry, founder of KindTwo, and an advocate for neurodiversity and inclusion in the workplace. KindTwo empowers individuals to embrace their ADHD, to work with them, not against them, and helps organizations understand the benefits of neurodiverse teams and create an inclusive culture that actually benefits the business. In our conversation, we dive into the topic of neurodiversity in the context of high-performing teams, by first understanding what a neurodiverse team is. We unpack strategies for creating an inclusive culture that adapts to different working and communication styles, as well as creating a hiring process that welcomes diverse individuals. Counterintuitively, it turns out that sharing interview questions up front does contribute to a more diverse, higher-performing team. Gina shares her personal experience with practical steps for CTOs looking to start a change in their organizations. As she says, diverse teams are a key to innovation. Stay tuned and don't forget to subscribe for more insights into creating high-performing teams and standout products. This episode is brought to you by Adiva, a global network of top developers connecting businesses with world-class talent. Whether you need to scale your team or bring an idea to life, Adiva empowers you to increase your engineering capacity without the overhead of traditional hiring. Visit adiva.it to learn more. Hi, Gina. Thank you for joining me today.
Thanks so much for having me.
I want to start. I'm very excited about this topic, primarily because every time we speak about diversity and inclusion, it's often in the context of a company needs to be socially responsible, or we need to tick a compliance box to enable diverse people to work in the organization. And most of the time it's focused on gender diversity or other similar factors. So neurodiversity wasn't as common until recently, and now it's starting to get traction. And I want you to help us all understand more about neurodiverse teams, how they can function well, how they can perform highly so that the business can also benefit, not only be socially responsible. So that's my idea of our conversation today. I'm very much looking forward to the insights that you're going to share. But let's start with a quick intro of your background. Like, you started in consultancy, then moved into neurodiversity coaching, trainings on inclusion. So let's help us understand more about your background, and then we can dive into the topic.
Sure. So thank you so much for having me. I hope I do this subject justice. So I started working in technology about 15 years or so ago now. So I took a bit of a wiggly path, which actually I think the older I get, the more I realize many people have taken wiggly paths to the moment that they're at today. But from a consultancy point of view, so I've spent the last few years leading digital transformation. So I'm based in the UK, quite a lot of high stakes programs for some of the biggest brands in the UK. Under the surface, I was burning out repeatedly. I think in my 20s, I spent a lot of time trying to prove myself, that I definitely could do the job, etc., which I think quite a lot of people can resonate with. And one of the turning points for me was probably during lockdown when I got my ADHD diagnosis. So I realized that the systems and the expectations surrounding me weren't necessarily built for me. And it's not that they were wrong, it's that I didn't understand how to work within the realms that I was in, I guess. And the more I now understand my brain, the easier it is, I find, to go back into my consulting world or to support organizations to create neuro-inclusive teams. And terminology, we'll use neurodiverse, neuro-inclusion, I think, throughout this conversation. But it became my mission to empower leaders, especially those that are feeling overwhelmed and misunderstood. The idea is to create environments where people and teams can thrive without this need to constantly mask behaviors and burning out. So it's led me to KindTwo, so KindTwo. The reason for that is around compounding kindness. And I truly believe that the more kind conversations we have, the more the network effect will take effect, and the kinder more conversations will become.
You mentioned like after your diagnosis, you understood yourself better and how well you can perform in certain environments and not in others. And I think this is a great basis to kind of understand neurodiverse teams and neurodivergent individuals, how they perform within those teams. Or maybe you can shed some light on that. How do neurodiverse teams work? How do they look in practice?
I think that's a really good frame. And I think that the term neurodiverse and neurodiverse team to me isn't a checkbox for inclusion. A diverse team, regardless of its, I don't know, if you think of biodiversity in terms of plants and I don't know, and rainforest, there are so many different types of plants and trees, etc., in that. I'm not a scientist, but in that space that enable each other, and that's for me the best part of a diverse team. So whether it's thinking, different ways of thinking, problem solving, and the way we approach challenges, it's not for me. It's not necessarily just about being neurodiverse. Diverse is a space where we know that people are different, but actually it becomes a benefit. So I don't know, in practice, it could look like a mix of strengths like creativity or hyperfocus and pattern recognition, there's also, I think, a balance of complementary support. So not everybody functions in the same way. Not everybody has come to the table with the same set of skills. And whilst it's hyperfocus can be a really great thing about my ADHD brain, for example, but sometimes I need someone to, pat me on the shoulder and go, hey, you've been doing the same thing for 6 hours. Like, you're all right. Yeah, I'm fine. I'm having a really good time. So, and I think that leads into my next point around psychological safety, where team members feel like they can contribute ideas without fear of judgment, or patting me on the shoulder, for example, and saying, you've been doing this for quite a long time now, Gina. Can we stop? Yeah, fine. And I think the last one is around adaptable structures. So everybody bringing their best to the table is going to be different. So flexible communication styles, collaborative problem solving, or tools that accommodate different processing speeds. So for example, if we take an interview process, there's a long standing debate of whether or not we should provide questions beforehand of an interview. I am of the opinion that interview questions are a good thing to share beforehand, because an interview isn't necessarily a test of character. It's, can this person do the things that we need them to do, and are we the right fit for them? So giving people the best possible chance of having that conversation can be really helpful, rather than people feeling like they're put on the spot because their brains don't process information in the same way as the person that wrote the questions, for example.
What are the common misconceptions of leaders about working with neurodiverse teams?
I think that there can be some misconceptions around it's a problem to fix. So I believe people aren't broken and we don't need to be fixed. I think there are different environments where people thrive in different ways. So that's the first misconception, that people aren't broken, that we work in different ways. And actually, it's a benefit to a team when you've got somebody that's different in your team. You might need to support them in a different way, but it does give you, I don't know, that difference of thought. I think there's another one around lowering standards. In fact, I think accommodating neurodiverse talent often raises the bar for creativity and innovation and problem solving. And finally, I think that everybody's needs are the same is another misconception. Leaders can sometimes apply blanket approaches instead of tailoring accommodations, which can unintentionally exclude people. I think that's another misconception, that people aren't, very, very rarely people are doing something on purpose. And when we unintentionally exclude people, I think the more we know, the more we can do something with that information. So understanding more about neurodiversity and how it can benefit, and also the challenges that it brings, can then maybe open somebody's mind to go, oh, okay, oh, that's why that person did that. Or, oh, maybe that's why I think in this way. So it opens, when we can communicate in the same language, I think it can be really beneficial to include different types of people in the conversation.
So while we're at it, what are some practical ways you could organize a team or create the culture in the company to empower diversity in the team and to actually benefit from it? Like you mentioned, you're hyper-focused and, you're being able to work best in that setup, while for other individuals, it's not as necessary. So in practical terms, like for specific team context.
Yeah, I think from a team context, it's really important to understand how you work as an individual, how your team works as individuals, and how you work together. Because the more we understand about each other, the more we can support when, our strengths and our challenges can often be a balance for another person's. There's a really cool thing called the Manual of Me, which is a way of explaining in written form, like this is the way I work best. These are the things that I find challenging. This is what I bring to the table. Maybe these are my preferred or best working hours, that kind of thing. And then promoting discussion around that, because these things aren't necessarily, for me, these are positive things. They're not negative. Understanding how somebody works best means you can get the best out of the people that you're working with, rather than, oh, this person doesn't do this. Okay, so they're not right for the job, but what can they do? Because my brain gets a bit meta about this kind of stuff, but all of the jobs that we do now didn't exist when I started work, and my role will evolve in the next 10 to 15 years. So the skills that people have, I think, could be taught, the way we interact with each other, and I think the kind behaviors that we can show both ourselves and one another, for me, become fundamental. And then we can start learning about terminology and different types of neurodiversity. I think the basis for me is creating that psychological safety where people can show up for themselves and each other.
And talking about the hiring process, you mentioned sharing interview questions up front, and what other adjustments can we do in that process to create an inclusive hiring culture?
Yeah, I think for me, it's a tool in a toolkit. So different roles will require different skill sets. They'll require different types of interview processes. I think the sharing interview questions can reduce anxiety, and it can allow some candidates to prepare. Other people will look at them and go, actually, I'm fine, just off the cuff, amazing. I think using some skills-based assessments can be really, really helpful. So sometimes interviews can reward social confidence over capability, and skills-based assessments. So I don't know, in a technical interview, that there's a technical test in the moment. So I don't know, if you're hiring an engineer, can they code? How quickly can you get to that answer? Does that person need to do a 6-hour competency test? Probably not. How much information do you need from this person to get your answer, I guess? And then I think also involving different people in designing your hiring practices. So, for example, neurodiverse, if you're trying to make your processes more inclusive or more neuro-inclusive, involving people that could support designing the hiring practices. You could do some test runs with people of how did that interview work for you? Is there anything that we could have done differently? That kind of thing. And I think that buy-in from the people that work with you can also be really helpful, and get that added benefit that they become even more champions for your company.
In one of our previous episodes with Alice and Macmillan, we were discussing the hiring process and adjustments and hiring for specific positions and roles and needs of the requirements for the specific position, let's put it like that. And not in terms of the technical skills only, but what kind of person do I need within this team? And she mentioned something interesting, like we are not hiring to fill a list of specific people we need for these positions, but we are hiring to fit the puzzle. So I need a certain person to fit into this team and maybe add some diverse way of working or diverse opinions. And then I need someone else with diverse skill set and different maybe background or experience of way of expressing themselves to fit the rest of the puzzle. And it really made sense. And I'm thinking, like, in the context that we discuss right now, it's like these culture fit interviews that are very common recently. I think they often go into the direction of screening if someone is the right fit for this particular way of working. And if you don't tick all of the boxes, like we need, I don't know, an outgoing person, or we need someone who can communicate and get their way through all of the challenges they're facing, and putting everyone in the same box culturally to just fit into your culture, I think it kind of creates, it backlashes because it doesn't allow for diverse individuals to work well in that setup. So how would you, what are your comments on this in terms of this specific cultural fit interviews and that part of the hiring process?
Yeah, I think cultural interviews were initially set up to see if you were the right fit for that company. And I think that as we evolve as people and as we evolve as companies, I think the realization that we don't need everybody to be the same in an organization, I think is quite groundbreaking. Of the cultural interview, I think they're still important because it's where you get to ask the questions of, is this company the right fit for me, or is this person the right fit for the company? I think there could be some tweaks on the questions because it's not just about, can this person fit in this very specific box that I've created? It's what's the mutual benefit of this person joining this company? Is it, do they have skills that we don't have? Can we learn from them? Can they learn from us? It's not just about how do we fit this person into this box. It's how do we use the cultural interview to enrich each other?
And if we speak about, I want to go into the advantages of working with diverse individuals. So if we speak about having a team that's very diverse and everyone has their specific strengths, what would it look like? Like, what are the things that are strong sides for different individuals?
Yeah, I think the importance of being diverse, I think there's a really interesting angle here around the advantages that it can bring. And things like, I don't know, enhanced creativity. Different people have different ways of thinking. If you think when Ford created a car, he said you can have any car as long as it's a specific color. We're in a position now where there are so many different types of cars and they all look different. And, the innovation has moved on. And to get that innovation, we need diversity of thought. We're not going to get to the same answer by everybody thinking the same. So I think that's one really interesting point. The other one, maybe some resilience in problem solving. So neurodivergent individuals can spot patterns or connections that other people miss, which can make them really, really great at complex problems, to be able to see the end to end of something that somebody's at the beginning of the challenge and another person's already figured it out. And sometimes it can be quite mind blowing to see somebody solve a problem really quickly that somebody else has been working on for months and months. I think you can ask the question. I think another one around increased innovation, which I think is a byproduct of the enhanced creativity. When we include these differences of perspectives, we're more likely to get to design products and services that resonate with a broader audience. For example, I worked at a company once where there was a whole rebrand, and when I don't know, about new colors, new fonts, etc., and when this website went live, the font wasn't accessible. So if you were dyslexic, for example, dyslexic people weren't able to read the words on the website. And this is a FTSE 150 company in the UK. So they're, one of the biggest companies in the UK, and people couldn't read the website. And it was actually somebody in the company that saw it once it was live and said, I can't read any of that because the spacing of the letters was too close. So I can't remember the exact thing. We're not going to catch everything. I think the more we are open to having a diverse discussion of thought, I think we do increase the ideas that we're going to resonate with more people and also find new and exciting ways of doing things.
Yeah, that makes total sense. I mean, you're just missing stuff because you don't know, and you can't know if you don't have people on your team to help you understand.
Yeah, exactly.
And how does this look like to consultancies? Because, being in the consultancy business, companies tend to have this client focus where they want to make an impression with most of the candidates that they send, and everyone has to go through interviews that screen for communication and consultancy skills and ability to navigate your way through the process. And most of the time, that's adapted for people who are more outgoing and who communicate more easily. How, like, I assume the bias is even bigger within consultancies. You were in that space for a long period. So what's your experience in that setup?
I don't know whether it's bigger or smaller. I'm not sure. I think there's unspoken bias in many spaces. So thinking about the pressure to meet client expectations and project deadlines can mean that screening can include traits of things like confidence, rapid decision making, being really vocal in a meeting, which does then I don't think this is just true for consultancy, but it can happen. I think this creates that unspoken bias against the quieter, more reflective individuals or someone that processes information differently. I think, ironically, neurodiverse humans can bring this fresh perspective that gets you a different out-of-the-box solution and an ability to focus in different places. Because if all of your team are that loud, rapid decision-making, confident, really vocal type person, if everybody is like that, then you're very, very likely to miss something. In the same way as if everybody's really quiet and everybody's really reflective, I think being able to have a mix of multiple types of people in a team, that's where you really get the value. You've got, the ability for people to deal with those high stakes environments, or you've got somebody that's able to cut through the noise really, really quickly, or someone that can reflect on something and go, actually, I think it's something slightly different. I think this doesn't just span around diversity. I think there are cultural things as well. So Japanese culture is very different to English culture, for example. When in a Japanese company, they often look at all of the permutations for a challenge and then they come back with an answer, which can be really frustrating if a different culture wants an answer immediately. There are pros and cons to both. But if you're in a position where a group of people are looking through the minute details of things, they're going to find different challenges that they can then overcome versus the team that want to prototype something really, really quickly and get something over the line and iterate on it. Both of those ways of working are right in their context. And I think when we bring those things together, that the understanding of somebody else's point of view is the most important thing. Why is that person doing that thing in that way? Oh, okay, I can understand that. I can get on board with it, or I can't, and I'm going to have this discussion with them.
And within one of the companies that you worked for, you created a network of 250 individuals, right? Neurodiverse individuals. Can you share more about that?
Yeah, sure. So I created a neurodiversity network within a consultancy that I was working at. It started as a really grassroots thing around creating safe spaces for neurodivergent individuals to share experience, to share support with each other. And it kind of grew from there. It kind of grew from that network effect of one person going out to speaking to a few people. They then spoke to other people. It was really interesting. We did a survey within the organization it was an anonymous survey of how people identified the support that they were getting and what they wanted from this network. It's been really successful in the help in terms of educating managers and colleagues to be able to create those inclusive environments and also provide some practical tools as well to embrace diversity. Grown to, like you said, 250 members now, which has been really cool. And we've focused on real stories and connections as well as that actionable advice, which both of those things tied together, I think, then starts to foster psychological safety. It wasn't about inclusion for inclusion's sake. It's about demonstrating both business and personal benefits of creating those environments where people can thrive and where difference is accepted and embraced.
Did the business know that some of these individuals were neurodivergent, or was it just as part of the network they started opening up?
So I think it's one of those things that isn't spoken about very much, and by creating this space, it's then enabled safer conversations to people for people to share. So people will share things maybe with their managers, and also people in the UK specifically don't have to disclose things. So I think for managers to understand how different people interact and how different people work can be really, really helpful. So understanding what ADHD is, what autism is, can be helpful. I think the inverse of that is to understand how to create that psychologically safe space, that it doesn't matter, because you can support somebody regardless of how different they are, because you've created that space that people can be themselves in an environment.
Okay. So based on all of your experience up until now, what if you were to create a step-by-step framework for CTOs to build and grow high-performing neurodiverse teams? What would these steps be?
I think step number one would be around understanding neurodiversity. So educating yourself and your team on what it means and how it can show up, because it's different for everybody. I think the next step, one before two, whatever, is creating psychological safety. We've spoken about that quite a lot today, around fostering that environment where people do feel valued and supported, no matter what their working style is. I think flexible processes are really helpful. So different ways of communicating, it enables different methods of problem solving, and therefore the delivering of the outcomes becomes a lot more solid. So what I mean by that is things like, if you've got a communication method which is purely email or purely call, is there a way of you opening that up to have both? Because some people resonate with information in different ways. Also, slightly different, but on the same tangent, does this really need to be a meeting? Do we really need to have cameras on, etc., etc.? Just softly challenging ourselves of, just because we've always done something like this, what benefit does it actually bring us? I think last two, focusing on strengths. So once we understand what our strengths are, we can then start leveraging our unique abilities, and instead of forcing conformity, and say that word then, forcing conformity is what I was trying to say, because there's a real beauty in difference. I think we come to the table with such different backgrounds and such different ways of doing things, that in a world now where innovation is so highly sought after, the best way to get innovation, in my opinion, is to diversify the people that are in your team, diversify your thought process. And then the last one, that I think from a practical point of view, is to provide the right tools. And there may be some experiments and experimentation here to ensure that everyone has the access to the accommodations they need. So if people are in an office, there's things like quiet spaces, I don't know, a project management tool, or enabling flexible working hours. Do we really need to be at the desk from 9 till 5? And again, softly challenging ourselves. It might still be the right thing for people to work 9 to 5, but maybe it isn't. And what benefit could we get if we did something differently?
How do you envision neurodiversity shaping the future of leadership and innovation and team performance? So everything we discussed about today.
Oh, cool question. I think that neurodiversity, or diversity in general, will become a competitive advantage once leaders continue, I don't know if it's necessarily start, but to continue to recognize the power of diverse thinking. Future leaders won't just be managing teams, they're going to become these architects of inclusive systems that enable every individual to contribute at their best, which then continues to drive that innovation and performance.
And as a takeaway, if there's one mindset shift or one actionable takeaway for our listeners today, what would that be?
Yes, I would. One thing, if I could sum everything up into one thing, is to stop trying to fit people into predefined boxes. We're asking ourselves, what do we need to thrive? Simple questions can be so transformative for both for individuals, teams, and organizations.
Amazing. Thank you, Gina. I really enjoyed our conversation today. It was short and packed with a lot of interesting insights. I'm sure that everyone will be able to understand this much better, and hopefully we all strive to create a better future for everyone individually and our teams.
Well, thank you so much for having me. Perfect.
CTO Insights is brought to you by Adiva. To learn more about how we support innovative tech teams, visit adiva.it. Don't forget to subscribe to CTO Insights on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Substack, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Thanks for tuning in.